and thank you so much for joining me for the Vintage Read Show weekly book chat. Now, this is part 2 of our Sophie book review, and it's been really enjoyable to read this book because I could revisit some of my favourite Sophie moments. Now, probably not surprising, it's been the now Duchess of Edinburgh's obvious regard for family that has really impressed me the most in this book, her care of that. And as Sean Smith gives ample evidence of it, of Sophie really saving the royal family. A story that fascinated me was how Edward and Sophie chose their future home. Now, I'm going to be telling you little tales from the Kindle version of the book, so you'll see me looking down sometimes. Now, they thumbed through a catalogue of the Crown Estate properties one evening and they discovered the magnificent Victorian Gothic mansion, Bagshot Park. And this is the quote from the book. Edward drove Sophie out one weekend to take a look and she fell in love with the house immediately. She told friends that it had so much character. As anyone with experience of properties with character will tell you, this description usually means they need a lot of work, and Bagshot Park was no exception. Edward was impressed by how incredibly private the house was, and he was determined to restore the mansion to its former glory. Now, Edward initially took out a 50-year lease from the Crown Estate, effectively making his mother his landlady, and that was going to cost about £50,000 a year. But he subsequently extended this lease for 150 years, and that actually cost him £5 million. Now, the renovations he had in mind would restore some of its original character while making it a really good home for their modern family. Now, it's interesting that the plan for the house was actually to make it smaller, not bigger. Now, the usual figure given for the number of rooms of this massive mansion is 120. But nobody had been around with calculators, so Sean Smith says you can't really tell the exact figure. But it was a massive country pile. So they were going to have 3 members of staff living with them, a chef, a secretary, and Edward's personal man. So they would be occupying 3 staff flats, and when everything was finished, there would be 9 ensuite bedrooms and 5 reception rooms. So not bad, is it? I mean, it'd be quite fun to go around there for a country weekend. Both Highgrove, the country home of Charles, and Gatcombe Park, where Anne has lived since 1976, boast the exact number of bedrooms. Isn't that interesting? It must be to the desired amount of bedrooms to have 9 ensuite bedrooms. Edward and Sophie's intention to marry had not wavered despite everything that occurred the previous year, and work on their house, their home to be, would take 2 years. Now the proposal, which I love a good proposal. I love reading about all these sorts of things. So Edward took Sophie off for a holiday in the Bahamas, which is not a bad choice if you're going to do a romantic proposal. Sophie had absolutely no idea. Edward was going to be decisive at last. Just before Christmas in 1998, he had impulsively, or so it seemed, whisked Sophie away for a short break in paradise. After 2 sun-kissed days, they were enjoying a candlelit dinner when Edward dropped to one knee and said, "Darling, will you marry me?" Sophie was stunned and could scarcely speak the word yes before finding her voice and replying, "Yes, please." Even though they'd talked of marriage and a proper engagement many times, Edward had managed to take Sophie by surprise because they actually hadn't discussed it for about 3 years. Then the engagement photo call. Now, we all remember the disaster of Charles and Diana's engagement photo call. That was just horrible, whatever love means. But this went a lot better. Now, Edward said a few sort of clunky things, though. He seemed rather nervous. He warned the photographers that if Sophie's engagement ring catches the sun, you'll be blinded. He said a little cornerly, "Diamonds are a girl's best friend, or so I'm told." Quick as a flash, Sophie chipped in, "No, you're my best friend." That loving banter was their common bond. Isn't that lovely? Because she sort of saved him, because it was a bit cringy when he said, I was a girl's best friend, or so I've heard. I mean, I love Edward, but he can be a little bit awkward. Let's face it, he can be a little bit awkward. But for her to chip in like that, no, you're my best friend. That's lovely. She saved him. That's what all good marriages are about. They contentedly answered the usual flurry of questions and asked why they made such a good couple. And Edward replied a little lamely, I don't know, we just do, really. Oh no. And Sophie was much more helpful because she's the PR girl. So she came in with this. We share a lot of interests, we laugh a lot, and we have a great friendship. And asked how he proposed, the prince replied, well, I just spoke it. They neatly deflected the questions about the failed marriages of his sister and brother by observing, I think if anyone is going to get married, I hope they think they will get it right. We are the best of friends and we happen to love each other very much, and long may that continue. Oh, still my beating heart. I just think that's so gorgeous. Now, I'm going to give you one scandal, and it's the fake shake, because I just know you want to hear about the fake shake. And really, I was impressed by how mild it was. I was impressed by how well she handled quite an embarrassing situation. But when you read what she said, she really didn't say anything horrible. It was more just sort of off the record, casual conversation, but it was nothing really nasty. Probably Cherie Blair got the worst of it, but the royal family didn't come off too badly. Now, you know that there was a fake sheikh who was posing as wanting to open an international sports facility in Dubai. Now, this suggestion was almost guaranteed to attract Sophie's firm, who were very adept at promoting sport. Now, the fake sheikh and Sophie proceeded to chat as if they were sitting next to each other at a cosy dinner party in Chelsea. She had no idea that the conversation was being recorded. Oh, I feel for her. I mean, think about it. If your conversation was recorded sometimes when you're just talking to your husband or one of your kids, and you might say something, a bit gossipy about someone, wouldn't you just die if it was recorded? And you wouldn't mean harm. You've just got your guard down and you're just sort of having a bit of fun, bit of casual gossip, and you wouldn't ever want anyone to be hurt by anything you said. In retrospect, her comments about Tony and Cherie Blair, William Hague, although she did do a terrific impersonation of his flat delivery of speech, and John Major, are less interesting than her insight into Charles and Camilla. She actually defended Charles as a fun and relaxed father. He's a man who's always been ahead of his years. He was damned as a complete quack. People laughed at him for his views on architecture, for example, but now they're starting to take notice. She also hinted that Charles and Camilla might marry after the death of the Queen Mother. She observed, it's a very difficult situation. On the one hand, there's no reason why she shouldn't be accepted because he's divorced and she's divorced. But then again, you've got the issues of the monarch being the head of the church. So Sophie's just, really telling it how it is. And everything was really friendly and informal, and she was really happy to seal the deal for her PR agency, which was RJH office in Mayfair. But by mid-afternoon, her smile had completely vanished. A concerned member of staff at the News of the World had called up to tell her what happened, and desperate attempts to remedy the possible catastrophe was set in motion. Now, it has to be said that the palace machine went into overdrive to try to soothe the News of the World and the paper's editor, Rebecca Wade. Oh, the nefarious Rebecca Wade, or Rebecca Brooks, as she was known professionally. Of course, saying she's nefarious is just personal opinion. You do your own research and figure it out for yourself. You may completely disagree with me. As a result, Sophie was made available for an exclusive interview with a feature writer on the paper. In return, they had to hand over the Sophie tapes. Now, much to everyone's surprise, Sophie was much more forthcoming than she even was with the fake sheikh. She spoke about not having children until the age of 36. I certainly do not think that I've left it too late. I would explore all avenues and certainly wouldn't rule out IVF. She even addressed rumours about Edward's sexuality. I've heard something before we met, but I put it down to the fact that he was working in theatre and people had presumed he was gay. I never believed it, so it wasn't something that crossed my mind when I met him. How I'd love to be able to go out and sing from the rooftops. It's not true. I want to prove it to people, but it's impossible to do that. But of course, the headline on News of the World, "My Edward is not gay." But even though she did that interview in good faith and got the Sophie tapes, it was leaked to the Mail on Sunday. Of course it was. The story, it seemed, was going to run, and Sophie did not help matters by writing a personal letter of apology to the Blairs, to William Hague, to Charles and the Queen. The thought was well-meaning, but it could be interpreted as Sophie admitting she'd been in the wrong. So she suggested to the Queen that she might leave RJH, her agency, immediately, and the Queen reluctantly, no. Actually, Sean Smith says the Queen readily agreed that this was a good idea. Now, a little publicised casualty of all that was her partner, Murray Harkin. And while Sophie could sort of retreat behind the gates of Bagshot Park, he had to contend with the clicking of the cameras every time he opened the door to his South London home. He left the country and he spent a year in Oz, in Sydney, Australia, before coming back to the UK and starting over. He told PR Week magazine 5 years later, "I chose a strategy that was really stupid, which was not to say anything and hope it would go away, but it didn't." He added with disarming honesty, "It took me years to stop shaking every time I picked up a newspaper or to stop looking over my shoulder." And when you think about it, it is often the innocent people in the periphery of the royal family that suffer the most. Now, one of the most memorable words of the whole conversation between Sophie and the fake sheikh was when she referred to the Queen, pretty harmlessly, I think, as the old dear. The throwaway line could have been much worse if she'd called her the old dragon or the old battle axe. This is what Sean Smith is saying. In reality, it was just a sweet way of describing her mother-in-law, who she calls Mama in private. Now, evidently, I didn't know this, but there was another fake sheikh interview that was actually with Princess Michael of Kent. And in that interview, she described Diana as a bitter and nasty woman. And she correctly predicted that Camilla would one day be the Queen. Now, after Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother died, the Queen just quietly began to rely on Sophie for female company. And Sean Smith gives us a description of that. Sophie would pop around to Windsor Castle in 10 minutes to watch TV or stay up late discussing history enthusiastically with her mother-in-law. It wasn't a duty. Sophie loved to do it. They would turn the television on and watch historical documentaries together on a Saturday or Sunday evening, or better still, a good old-fashioned British war film, the sort of movie where Richard Todd or John Mills would star. But it wasn't just television time. The two women could be found poring over the priceless ancient documents preserved in the Royal Archive at Windsor. The Queen found Sophie a most comforting and calm presence and always chose her to share the back seat in the royal car that took the monarch to church in Sandringham. This was a great honour, especially at Christmas. Now, Sophie also got on really well with Philip, and it's said like this in the book. The Queen always found it a bit of a relief if female members of the family knew how to handle Philip. Sophie was not fazed by his abruptness and would not let him bully her. The Queen saw Sophie as a safe pair of hands within the royal family, a woman who turned her life around after the initial embarrassments that plagued her in the early years. She even used to invite her father over as well, and the Queen would invite them for dinner, and when her mother was alive as well. And so there was this lovely relationship even between the in-laws and the Queen. Now we'll get on to the death of Prince Philip, because I just found that so moving, didn't you, when Sophie just couldn't help crying during that interview? The death of her father-in-law was still obviously very raw for Sophie when she agreed to a wide-ranging interview for Radio 5. Now, this was to coincide with Prince Philip's 100th birthday. She invited the BBC breakfast presenter to Bagshot Park and told her the loss of Prince Philip had left a giant-sized hole in the lives of the royal family, and she was fighting back tears as she spoke. She described it as my "oh my goodness" moment. That was so moving. I really teared up when I watched that. I remember that very, very well. Now, I'm going to finish off. I don't want to take away all the best moments in the book. What Sean Smith tells us about after the Queen died and Sophie's involvement and her comforting of Princess Anne is incredibly moving. But I don't want to take away everything, all the really big moments from people that have purchased the book. Now, this is lovely, and I'm going to finish off with this. Sophie had given so many moving speeches in the past few years, but arguably nothing has brought a tear to the eye more than what she said at Headingley Stadium in Leeds 2 days before my darling Edward celebrated his 60th birthday in early March 2024. He's the best of fathers, the most loving of husbands, and still my best friend. Final quote. It's a pity she can never be queen because she would have made a really good one. So there you have it. That's my second part review of Sophie. And indeed, I really do think she is the glue that holds the royal family together. I really admire her very much. And after reading Sean Smith's wonderful book, I really feel like I understand her more. I know where she's coming from. And I'm so lucky I wasn't disappointed because it really just reinforced everything I already thought about the wonderful Sophie. I'll be back next week, probably not on the Friday for the book chat because I'm going to have a book interview with a wonderful author. So I'll see you then. Bye.